Amelia had always been a light sleeper, her nights punctuated by fleeting dreams that danced at the edge of her consciousness. But recently, the dreams had grown darker, more vivid, and unbearably real. Every night, as she drifted into sleep, she was transported to the same eerie place, a place she had never physically visited, but had seen in old, fading photographs. Amelia lived on the 15th floor of a modern apartment building, a place she took pride in owning. The apartment was sleek and contemporary, with clean lines and an abundance of natural light. It was a stark contrast to the crumbling Gothic manor that had haunted her nightmares, a family estate that had stood for generations before her father demolished it a year ago, shortly before his mysterious disappearance. The manor was large, old and ominous, its walls lined with memories that were better left forgotten. Her father, a stern man with a haunted look in his eyes, had inherited it after her grandfather's untimely death. Amelia had grown up hearing stories about the house, and though she had never set foot in it, she felt its shadow looming over her life. After her father's sudden and unexplained disappearance one cold winter night, Amelia had avoided even thinking about the place. But now, it seemed, the house had found its way into her dreams. Each night, the nightmare began the same way, walking through that seemingly endless dark corridor. The details were hauntingly familiar, drawn from those old, cursed photographs her grandfather had been so fond of showing her. The manor felt disturbingly real. The creak of the wooden floors, the draught whispering through cracks in the walls and broken windows, and the faint scent of mildew mingling with something far more sinister. The silence was broken only by a faint, unsettling laughter, a guttural sound that echoed through the emptiness. In the shadows, something caught her eye, and she instinctively took a step back, her heart skipping a beat. A ghoul squatted at the end of the corridor, its skin stretched tight over its bones like that of an ancient mummy, its malevolent eyes glowing an eerie red. It clung to the wall. When its eyes slowly met with hers, a chilling giggle escaped its twisted mouth, a sound that sent icy tendrils of fear through her very soul. Her body tensed, every nerve on edge, as the ghoul's terrifying presence threatened to overwhelm her. At first, the dream was fleeting, just a brief, horrifying glimpse of that nightmarish creature staring at her with its unblinking red eyes, boring into her soul. Amelia would jolt awake, her heart pounding, the remnants of its eerie laughter still echoing in her mind. She would try to reassure herself that it was just a nightmare, that it couldn't hurt her, that it wasn't real. It was merely a product of her mind's darkest corners. Sleep overtook her once again, dragging her back into the nightmare's clutches. Amelia found herself standing in the center of a dimly lit room, and to her horror, ghouls began to close in around her. Their twisted forms emerged from the shadows, their eyes glinting with wicked delight. The room echoed with their whispers and soft, eerie laughter, a chilling cacophony that drilled into her soul. She could feel the walls closing in, her pulse racing, every instinct screaming at her to run. But her body refused to obey, paralyzed by the overwhelming fear that gripped her. She was trapped, unable to move, as the ghouls' grotesque faces drew nearer, their whispers growing louder, filling her with a terror unlike anything she had ever known. Suddenly the ghouls parted, revealing something far more horrifying. A group of humanoid creatures, their skin a sickly grey, their eyes burning with a cruel intelligence. They moved with a predatory grace, their mouths twisted into grotesque smiles. Without a word, they descended upon a figure lying on the floor, a man, his eyes wide with terror. As the creatures tore into the man, Amelia's breath caught in her throat. The man's face, twisted in agony, was unmistakable. It was her father. His screams echoed in her ears, mingling with the ghouls' laughter, a horrifying symphony that filled her with dread. She wanted to look away, to shut her eyes and block out the horror, but she was trapped, forced to witness the gruesome feast. The leader of the ghouls turned its gaze upon her, its eyes glinting with sinister glee. A twisted smile spread across its face as it spoke, its voice dripping with malice.
"Ah, little angel,"
it sneered.
"you finally joined our little reunion. Please forgive us for pulling you into this nightmare. Your father ensured our ancestral home was utterly destroyed, and while I'd prefer to greet you in person, this will have to do."
It then shifted its attention to the pile of leftover carcasses on the floor, its smile widening.
"Your father turned his back on his legacy, and now every night he pays the price. His soul and body are torn apart, piece by piece, in a never-ending punishment."
A chilling realization struck Amelia like a bolt of lightning. The creature had called her Little Angel, the same nickname given to her when she was a child. The familiarity of the phrase, spoken by this twisted, malevolent being, sent a wave of terror crashing over her. The truth she had been trying to avoid came rushing to the surface. This creature, this grotesque leader of the ghouls, was her grandfather. Her heart pounded in her chest as the horrifying reality set in. The man she had once known, the one who had doted on her with kind words and gentle smiles, was now the very embodiment of evil, dragging her into a nightmare from which there seemed to be no escape. As her eyes fell upon the pitiful remains of the devoured corpse on the floor, the crushing weight of her legacy bore down on her. Tears welled up as she cried for her father. This was his punishment for trying to save her, for destroying their ancestral home, burying the dimensional portal beneath, and for daring to break free from the curse that had ensnared their family for generations. A deep, gnawing fear took root in Amelia's mind. She was next in line, destined to suffer the same fate, to be pulled into the darkness her grandfather had embraced. The ghouls circled her, their laughter echoing in her ears as the reality of her legacy sank in, a legacy that threatened to consume her whole. The creature's voice cut through the suffocating darkness, its tone laced with twisted satisfaction.
"Yes, I am your grandfather,"
it revealed, its grin widening as it spoke.
"These creatures you see, these abominations, are bound to you by blood. Dark magic, forged in secrecy and desperation, linked our family to this cursed collective. A pact made by our ancestors long ago, a deal that ensured their survival at the cost of their humanity. In exchange for power and immortality, they sacrificed their souls, evolving into beings far superior to mere humans."
It paused, letting the weight of its words sink in before continuing.
"Now you, my dear, are next in line. You must release us back into this dimension to restore what your father so recklessly destroyed. He sought to sever the ties that bind us, to undo the curse, but in doing so, he condemned us to this limbo, this endless nightmare. Only you can reverse the great harm he inflicted upon us. Fulfill your legacy, Amelia, and set us free."
Amelia pulled herself out of the nightmare, gasping for breath as the weight of her fate settled over her like a suffocating shroud. The words of her grandfather echoed in her mind, leaving her trembling with the realization that the darkness she had fought to escape was now a part of her blood, her destiny. Amelia grew desperate, willing to try anything to escape the relentless nightmares. She avoided sleep at all costs, downing pot after pot of coffee in a frantic attempt to stay awake through the night. But no matter how hard she fought, Exhaustion would eventually claim her, dragging her back into the clutches of sleep. The nightmares persisted, each one more intense, more vivid, and more terrifyingly real than the last. Her desperation only deepened, knowing that no matter what she did, she couldn't outrun the horrors waiting for her in the darkness. And then the nightmare shifted. As Amelia stood in the room, surrounded by the ghouls, their laughter took on a different tone, one of anticipation, of expectation. They moved closer, their eyes glinting with a strange hunger. This time, they spoke. "Open it," they hissed, their voices overlapping in a twisted chorus. "Open it and you will be free." Amelia's heart raced. She didn't know what they meant, what they wanted her to open. But the ghouls kept urging her, their laughter growing louder, more frantic. They began to chant, their voices rising in a terrifying crescendo. "Open it! Open it! Open it!" She was forced to look down, and there at her feet was an old chest she recognized from the attic photographs, one of her grandfather's prized possessions. Now vivid in her dream, the chest's surface was covered in strange symbols that seemed to pulse with dark energy, the symbols shifting and changing as they throbbed. She felt an unnatural pull toward it, as if the chest itself was calling to her, begging to be touched and opened. The ghouls crowded around her, their laughter now a frenzied cackle. "Open it and let us out!" Amelia hesitated, a deep sense of dread settling over her. She knew instinctively that whatever was inside that chest was not meant to be released. But the ghouls were relentless, their voices rising to a fever pitch, their eyes locked onto her with an intensity that made her skin crawl. "Open it," they shrieked, "or we will never leave you." Amelia's hands trembled as she reached for the chest, her mind screaming at her to stop. But the ghouls' laughter was deafening, their voices drilling into her mind. She felt herself losing control, her willpower slipping away as she touched the lid. As her fingers brushed against the cold, rusted metal, the ghouls' laughter shifted into a low, sinister growl. The symbols on the chest changed, settling into a stationary pattern that glowed with a golden hue. The chest pulsed under her touch, the symbols growing even brighter. Instinctively, her fingers began to move, pressing the symbols like keys on a keyboard in a pattern she didn't consciously recognize but felt deep within her. She knew she had to make a choice, open it, and release whatever evil was trapped inside, or find a way to wake up before it was too late. The symbols on the wooden chest shifted once more, finally converging into a single emblem at its center. As they settled into place, an orb materialized above the chest, surrounded by strange shapes orbiting around it, the energy building to a crescendo. In a moment of clarity, Amelia jerked her hand away, closing her eyes and shaking her head, her mind focusing on one desperate thought. Wake up, wake up, wake up. The room began to blur, the ghouls' laughter fading into the distance. The world around her seemed to crumble, the walls dissolving into darkness. She could feel herself being pulled away, the nightmare slipping from her grasp. With a gasp, Amelia woke up, drenched in sweat, her heart pounding in her chest. She stared out at the scene outside, taking in the view. The room was silent, the air still, but the laughter lingered in her mind, a ghostly echo of the horror she had escaped. She knew the nightmares would return, they always did, but for now she was awake, and that was all that mattered. Breathing heavily, she sat up in bed, trying to shake off the last vestiges of the nightmare. She was in her apartment, the familiar surroundings bringing her a moment of comfort. She turned to the dresser, where a gold cross lay, its significance deeply personal, offering her a sense of solace as she gazed at it. She swung her legs over the side of the bed, her feet touching the cool floor. But as she stood up, her eyes caught something in the middle of the room. Her breath hitched in her throat, her body freezing in place. Amelia's blood ran cold as she realized that the nightmare was far from over. There, in the shadows of her bedroom, stood the chest from her nightmares, the same old rusted chest. The chest was here, in her apartment, as real and solid as the floor beneath her feet. The symbols shift and change with more power now. It began with a faint, almost imperceptible tapping on the wall. But then, the darkness thickened, solidifying into black, shifting shadows that encircled her. The ghouls had followed her from the nightmares, their grotesque forms closing in, and among them, the most terrifying of all, her grandfather, twisted and corrupted beyond recognition.
Ah, little angel, I'm so glad we can finally meet in person. Now recite the incantation, the lullaby I taught you as a little girl. It's entrenched deep within you.
Amelia felt herself slipping into a trance, the words escaping her lips against her will.
Canda Estrata Montos.
With every ounce of strength she had left, she shook her head, fighting to break free. Unbeknownst to her grandfather, she clutched the golden cross from her dresser tightly in her hand. As she held it high, the creature recoiled in fear, its body shaking as its hands covered its eyes tightly. The only vulnerability she had seen from these creatures. Seizing the moment, Amelia plunged the cross into the heart of the pulsating wooden chest. A surge of blue lightning exploded from the point of impact, crackling with raw, otherworldly energy. The bolts of lightning spread out, lashing at the ghouls, tearing through the darkness with violent force. One by one, the ghouls writhed and screamed as the blue energy consumed them, until nothing remained but silence and empty shadows.
Sorry, grandfather. I'm too old for lullabies. What a mess.